Hello and welcome to the Heat Check podcast, Miami Herald, Miami Heat podcast. I'm David Wilson. I'm joined, as always, on the other line by Anthony Chiang, our Heat beat writer here at the Herald. He had his hair kind of done up earlier, a couple little tufts, but they came out pre-show here, and now he's just letting it rock.
Did you see Jimmy do that in the middle of the game, or it just like?
I think from what he said, I have to listen back to what he said post game, but basically like. The braids, I think, started coming out the other day. He had them, I guess, braided up from his. Remember, he had from his trip to Argentina.
Yeah.
And he said one of the braids, I guess, came out the other day. So he kind of tied some of it up and kept some of them in. And I think just as the game went, because by the second quarter, half of them were out. I can't imagine he just was pulling them out. And then at halftime, obviously, he undid the whole thing because it was falling apart. But it didn't stop him from putting together another just vintage Jimmy Butler performance in the Heat. Get a win by the time people are listening. By the time this show goes up, the Heat might have the NBA record for most wins by 5 or fewer points because they tied that record last night. I don't know, just kind of a typical Heat game. A little bit more, more balance, I guess. It wasn't just the Jimmy show. Gabe Vincent was good. Bam was obviously made a big block down the stretch, but we've talked about it all year long. The fact that the story tends to be the same for this team every week, and definitely feels the same. Another close win, a close loss over the weekend. They just keep doing their thing.
Yeah, and it's just their inability to string together. It's impossible to string together 48 quality minutes. That's really hard to do. But consistent play throughout the game has been the biggest challenge, right? And you see it
they were up by 12 in the first quarter, and then
and that's the NBA today, right? With the 3-pointer and all that. Teams are gonna get back into the game. It's just you want to see this team cruise to a win once. Well,
it's the NBA today, but good teams blow teams out every once in a while.
Yeah, and especially a Utah team at the end of a long trip, East Coast trip. They're depleted after the trade deadline. They're missing Colin Sexton. Mm-hmm. And you need this game. They're in playing tournament territory too, but the Heat really needed this win after losing in Orlando a few nights ago. And they got it, but they were down by 1 with a minute left.
Yeah.
They easily could have lost that game, and the conversation would have been completely different. It's just this team just can't get any kind of separation from teams. I think since we recorded it last time, I don't think they have a more than a 5-point win since then, because at that point they had one 5-point win.
It was that Hawks game we talked about it last week. It was like an 8-point win, and then since then, they obviously lost to Orlando over the weekend, a 4-point win last night. We'll see what happened Wednesday. We're recording this Tuesday morning.
So they have one win of more than 5 points in the last 2 months. It's
crazy.
That's insane
for a team that is still a good team, right? They're going to make the playoffs. They're probably going to host the play-in. They're not a great team, but they're a real, NBA team that is, they're going to be in all likelihood one of the last 16 teams playing in the NBA this year. I guess it is unprecedented. I was going to say, is it unprecedented? It kind of is unprecedented because at some point here, almost definitely the Heat are going to have the most close wins in NBA history. And they're also closing in on, as you've chronicled all year long, the clutch games record. They've got a real shot at that with 12 games left. 50 of their 70 games this year have been clutch games, right? Is that 50 of 70?
50 of 70, yeah.
Which means within 5 points in the last 5 minutes? Is that the qualifier for it?
Yeah. Within 5 points in the final 5 minutes.
In the final 5
points. At any point.
At any point, yeah. So sometimes they can end in blowouts. But again, that's crazy.
Yeah. Again, it's unprecedented. They're going to set an NBA record. Yeah. I think the NBA record is 41. I want to say off the top of my head. I was just looking for it now, but I couldn't find it. The Nuggets set it in the late 70s. I think the Heat now have 39 such games of that have been decided by 5 points or less. So they're 3 away from setting their NBA record with 12 games left. Yeah, they're going to get it.
And that's really the record.
At this point, they're going to get it.
The clutch games is not tracked all the way back, but that is like, that's a real NBA record. That is like the entire history, because we have the scores for every NBA game ever. Like, that is a real NBA record.
It's incredible. They already have the record for, like you said, they already tied the record for, tied it or they set it, David?
Last night?
They tied the record
could be
for
set
most
by
wins.
the time.
Yeah.
It could be set by the time this comes out, depending what happens Wednesday night.
Yeah.
So
they tied it. So I mean, it is unprecedented. It's crazy. It's insane to cover, as you saw last night against Utah. Every game is the same, where it comes down to the final minute or two. And again, like we've said it the last few months, that's why they're a 500 team. That's why they are where they are. Because you're gonna win some of those games where Tyler Hero hits a big three with 57 seconds left, and you're gonna lose some of those games where Julius Randle makes a three that bounces off his foot, and there goes the game. So unfortunately, it's good that they're not getting blown out much this year, but it's also not good that they're putting themselves in these situations so many times, because at the end of the day, you're probably not gonna be much better than 500 most of the time when you're that type of team.
Yeah, I mean I think we finally kind of just said it last week. It's the story of this season. It makes them, I think, kind of still interesting to people going into the playoffs, whether or not that's deserved. They're probably going to get either. Well, they're probably going to. So I guess we should lay it out. They're almost definitely going to get the 7 seed now. They're up, or definitely going to get in the play-in. Probably very good shot to get the 7 seed. They're up 2.5 on Atlanta. 12 games left and down. Again, this will change by the time this goes up, but 4 games back of the 6th seed, which is currently a tie between the Knicks and Nets. So very, very going to be very tough to get out of the play-in. But so the way this team plays games, obviously they could lose 2 play-in games and just be done, but they could also win their numbers, their 7-8 game, play the Sixers in the first round and give them a scare, because I know Heat fans, I think, feel like they maybe own the Sixers a little bit. I don't know if the Sixers feel the same way, but I know if they fall behind in that series, they're going to start seeing ghosts. And I think both of us are we don't have super high hopes for what this Heat team can do in the playoffs, but it has been certainly an interesting season with the Eric Spoelstra line that he gives every night. You need season tickets, right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess
getting your money's worth.
You are getting your money's worth. There are close games. If you want to see a pretty solid basketball, probably not the season to go to Heat games, but they are, exciting, and you see some clutch shots and a lot of clutch moments. But yeah, I mean, at this point, it's hard to see them escaping the play-in, right? They're 3 games behind the Knicks and the Nets with 12 games to go. But the good news is they're 2.5 up on Atlanta as of Tuesday when we record this. So if they stay in this spot, whoever they face in that first play-in game that they host, they're going to be favored, right? So if they win that, they get that game probably be Tuesday. You probably don't open until Saturday or Sunday. You get 3 or 4 days off before the first round begins, and you most likely face either Boston or Philly. And like you said, I think Philly would be the more intriguing matchup just because you beat them last year, right? And you have, it just seems like a better matchup probably. But Boston, there's some history there too, and the Heat playing with 7 games. But yeah, either way, you're not gonna have home court advantage. You're gonna have to play that extra play-in game. You're gonna be at disadvantage. The Heat style of basketball doesn't seem like it's
conducive to winning over a 7-game series.
Or definitely over 2 or 3 rounds, right?
Yeah.
But that's where things stand right now, and that's probably the most likely outcome is you face either Boston or Philly in that first round.
Yeah, and of course, this team can easily lose not just 2 games, but they can lose 1 game, and then you get stuck. You've played 2 games by then. If you let's say you lose to Atlanta and then beat Chicago in the second playing game, then you're probably stuck playing Milwaukee with already having played 2 games and Giannis fully rested. And it's obviously not an ideal situation for this team. And it kind of at this point feels like a little bit of a march to whatever kind of frustrating finish this is going to be. But still 12 games left. They're still working in some new pieces. They got Kyle Lowry back. The stuff it's the NBA, stuff changes all the time. The Heat weirdly have been the one team that feel like they've not changed at all this year. But they're I don't want to say like big signs of hope, but a couple different things to monitor here as we go down the stretch, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jimmy Butler's number one, right?
Yeah, I mean he's.
Yeah, I mean, like when you have a player like Jimmy, like
you've said it a million times. It gives him a chance against anyone.
He's averaging 26 points on 63% shooting since the break. Like it's amazing they haven't like won more games with him the way he's playing. So whenever you have Jimmy Butler playing at that level, and it seems like he's turned it up recently, obviously as down the stretch here, he's had to because they need every win they can get. You're going to have a chance, right? Especially late in close games. He's very good in late in games. But I would say that is pretty much the only reason to have any type of hope of getting past the first round, considering where, what the team they're going to face to open the playoffs.
Yeah. And again, it's more about the opponent they're going to face, I think, than, like if they were playing, when
Atlanta in the first round.
At the trade deadline, we thought this team was going to get out of the play-in, maybe even get up to number 5. We thought Brooklyn was going to fade. We were not super big believers in New York. Instead, those two teams have like really held their ground. And I think if we thought that he maybe had a chance to get up to the 5 and then play Cleveland, we were like, all right, they'll win a game and then or win a series and then be stuck playing Milwaukee. And they've beaten Milwaukee before, they've lost to Milwaukee before. Like Bam versus Giannis, a decent enough matchup. Jimmy is can go toe to toe as a scorer with pretty much anyone. But they kind of have blown it basically over the last. Since the All-Star break. I mean, they've been very mediocre since the All-Star break. And I guess even going into the All-Star break when they lost 2 in a row and it's kind of like too late at this point, I guess.
Yeah, they're 5-6 since the break. Like that's not
and 5-8 over their last 13.
Well, 13, yeah. And I mean that Brooklyn loss entering the break obviously was not. I think they had a chance to overtake Brooklyn maybe in that game. But right before the break and they end up losing by double digits in Brooklyn, and then they've been mediocre to below average since the break. And that's why they are where they are right now. I think at one point, like Cleveland was even sliding and we were like, can they get to 4? Right.
Yeah.
Like maybe a few weeks before the All-Star break. And yeah, it's just, it's crazy. It's just crazy that this team, pretty much the same team as last year. And here we are with 12 games to go before the playoffs, and we're talking about the play-in and if they can get out of the play-in tournament.
Right.
It's just been a season I won't forget because of all the close games, because it just has been like insane and historic. But it's for the most part, it's been a bad season for them, right? Like it's been a disappointing season. And yeah, they beat Utah on Monday and they needed that win, and you take it right any way you can get it at this point. But it's not a great win. Like there were still the same issues are plaguing you. You had defensive lapses, which that's been to me the biggest, most alarming thing since the break is that their defense has been below average. I mean, they were a top 5 defense before the break, and I think they're ranked 21 or 22 since then in the 11 games since then. Their offense is pretty much the same, even though they're shooting threes at a higher rate, a better rate. They're turning the ball over more, so that's kind of negated their slight 3-point improvement. It's just they've been worse since the break, which you didn't expect, especially as they've gotten healthier. And they've dealt with injuries this year, right? Big picture, but they've been healthy now for like the last 2 months. Jimmy has missed like 1 game in the last 2 months.
Yeah.
Bam hasn't missed
other than Kyle Lowry.
Other than Kyle Lowry, your 3 main guys, Tyler, Bam, and Jimmy, have pretty much been in the lineup, give or take a few games, for the last 2 or 3 months, and they still have been around a 500 team. So it's such a large sample size now that I just think this is who they are, right? It took me a while. I think for the first 2 months, you and I were like, they're going to get it together. They're going to start making threes. When they get healthy, they'll be fine. But it's been such a large sample now that I just think this is who they are this season. They just they're a flawed team right now with the style they play and kind of the roster they have, with the way some guys are performing.
Yeah, and I think the last 2 weeks, as you kind of said, has been what has kind of sold us on this as being just like, because even going into the All-Star break, we were like, they'll They got Kevin Love obviously then, and I think even then we were like, the 3-point, they're still within striking distance to get out of the play-in. We believed, I think, that the 3-point shooting was going to bounce back, and I think we were actually right on that. It just probably happened too late. But just the fact that they got that 2-week stretch there out of the break, 2-3 week stretch, whatever, almost, I guess, a month now. But that stretch from the going into the All-Star break until now has just kind of made whatever improvement we're going to see here. And I think, again, the 3-point shooting has really bounced back. Kyle Lowry, no matter what you think of him, is going to help just because you're deeper now and you have more options. And he's actually, hit some really big shots over the last couple of games here. But the last 2 weeks just make it kind of put everything like, I don't know, it just kind of puts a lot of stuff out of reach. But I don't know, are there anything from these last couple of weeks? Again, because there have been, I think, a couple of positives mixed in with just bad results that I think if this was October or November or December, we would be saying, all right, like some signs here. If they can get this clicking in time, then they'll be fine. But is there anything that you've seen over these last couple of weeks that give you thought that maybe this team can hit another level in the final 10 plus games this season?
I mean, aside from Jimmy just playing at this level, as good as he's looked in the regular season, probably ever, right? Yeah. He's having one of the best seasons of his career. The 3-point shooting, like you said, I think they were shooting 33% before the break. Now they're like at 36 since the break. It's gone up. It's ticked up a little bit, which is really important for this team. Unfortunately, like I said, turnovers have kind of negated some of those, that uptick. And then I just getting healthy, right? Like you have Kyle Lowry back coming off the bench. You've seen flashes from him even in the first few games he's been available, how he can help this team. Yeah. You have Caleb Martin back in a bench role. They just have their full complement of guys. So it's going to take a bit. It's weird that Eric Spoelstra even said after the Utah game, I'm still trying to figure things out. There's 3 weeks left in the year, 4 weeks left in the season, but he just hasn't had everybody available much this season because of all the injury issues.
Yeah, and then especially you throw Kevin Love in, and Cody Zeller's still out, but we'll see. Broken nose, some guys can come back from those usually relatively quickly.
Yeah. So I mean, the rotation's still a work in progress. I think we're kind of seeing it come together a little bit here. Mm-hmm. But the fact that everyone is getting healthy now, that's encouraging. Jimmy's play is encouraging. The 3-point shooting starting to come around is encouraging. So those are positives, but unfortunately, if the Heat were still playing defense at a top 5 level after the break, they probably would be in a position at 6 or 5 right now. They would not be 5 and 6. They'd probably be 8 and 3 at this point, or 7 and 4. That'd make a big difference in the standing. So it's just that's been this season. It's when one thing goes right, something else goes wrong to offset it, and that's kind of what's gone on, unfortunately for them since the break.
Yeah, Jimmy basically kind of said the same thing post game yesterday. He was asked what he's seen since the All-Star break. He was the offense is, I think, pretty good right now. As you notice, the numbers don't totally bear that out because of the turnover issues, but the shooting,
the shot making is better.
The shot making has been much better. On Monday, 7 different guys in double figures. That's not happened a lot for this team this year. There's been so reliant on basically 3 guys to score for them. They did fine in the minutes without Jimmy, that was kind of their biggest issue for most of the season. But he basically our defense is not what it's supposed to be. And that second quarter where the Heat were started to kind of get run out of the building, obviously eventually stabilized and rallied to win, but it was just layup. The defense is just not again against a pretty mediocre Utah team that ultimately probably is not even going to make the play-in the West. And as you said, and on the end of a long road trip, it was very uncharacteristic Heat performance. Obviously they win in the end with a great defensive play by Bam, but they're you kind of summed it up. They can't get everything to work right at the same time, and that's been another big story. That explains in a lot of ways why they can't. Why all these games are so close, right? Because the way to blow teams out is to have a good offensive performance and a good defensive performance. The way to play close games is to be good on one side of the ball and bad on the other side of the ball, where you're either trading buckets or no one can score. And right now they're kind of trading buckets, and that's not a recipe to win.
I mean, I think that the unique thing about this team is we've seen what it could look like when it is working, right? We've seen what it can look like.
Yeah, well, they've actually
when they do put it together.
For the most, they've played pretty well against, as we said a couple of times, they've played pretty well against good teams. It's kind of as well as you could ask for a team that's in their position, like middle of the Eastern Conference, but then they lose to Orlando and
Charlotte twice and San Antonio.
Yeah, exactly. But they've beaten Phoenix, they've beaten Milwaukee, they've beaten
Boston
obviously.
Twice.
Yeah, like they have some good wins on their resume. Good for tournament seeding, but
I was gonna say, where would you seed them in the tournament based on their resume?
Yeah, I don't know. They're still probably like a 6 or 7 in the. Like, I don't know, they're not much better than their position because those are some really bad losses.
Yeah, and their point differential is, again, negative.
Yeah, right? Negative. I believe the only team in the East field right now with a negative point differential. They're like, that's what happens when you win a bunch of close games and don't get any blowout wins. Is give them like they're better than they're worse than their record indicates based on that number, which is like obviously kind of crazy.
So a question that I've been thinking about over the past few weeks, and Bam was a little better against the Jazz, especially late in the game. He kind of got it going there in the third quarter, and obviously made the big defensive play in the fourth quarter to stop potential game tying basket. But it seems like before the break, it was very Bam centric, right? The offense was built around Bam. Especially Tyler and Bam picking roles.
Yeah, especially because Jimmy was missing time. Yeah,
Jimmy was missing time. He was not as assertive, right? As he was trying to let Bam do his thing. Since the break, Jimmy's really taken it upon himself to kind of carry the offense, and the offense has become more Jimmy-centric, right? It's like leaning more toward Jimmy, which isn't a bad thing. But we've seen kind of Bam's numbers take a dip since the break because of that. His shot attempts are down, free throw attempts are down, points are down. Is it a bad sign that they can't like do it together, right? Like have both going at the same time? I mean, I guess we've seen it in the past, but
yeah, so that's the thing. We've seen it in the past, which makes me a little bit more, which makes me not as worried about it. But I don't. I mean, Bam, as you mentioned, was really good down the stretch last night.
For a lot of like offensive rebounds and stuff like that, right? It wasn't like getting to his spots. It was like offensive rebounds and.
I mean, I do wonder if he's, his usage. He's obviously like all of his like usage numbers are like going to be way higher than they've been. But like, he missed some pretty ugly jumpers last night. Like, part of me does wonder if he's running into a little bit of a wall or dealing with an injury or something. Like, you don't see him miss shots like he was missing last night. Obviously, down the stretch, he can lock in, especially on defense. Like, he's still going to give it to you, but it's another thing where, like, as we said, like, they can't get everything to click at once. It does. You were right that right now the Jimmy Bam combination, which is obviously the foundation of everything this team does, that's not humming either.
Yeah, I kind of feel like, and Spo's tried this more lately, is you kind of have you start Jimmy, Bam, and Tyler together, but if you can stagger their minutes through the game, it probably makes sense to have like almost two offenses, right? Like a Bam and Tyler offense,
right? Yeah.
And then a Jimmy offense.
I mean, that is kind of
Jimmy
like
post up ISOs.
The way they survived those Jimmy-less minutes last night was not like by a guy off the bench like going off. It was Bam carrying everything, and then like a couple guys hitting some big shots here and there. Like that's still they don't have, because Tyler Hero's in the starting lineup, they don't have like a sixth man who can just run the offense. They've got some good reserves, obviously. Now with Caleb Martin and Victor and. Well, Kyle can kind of run the offense because he's coming off the bench, but Victor can obviously get hot. But for the most part, they've got a bunch of role players on the bench. They don't have a Tyler. They don't have because even Kyle at this point is ultimately a role player, even if he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. But yeah, that's got to be the recipe for this team is basically, like you said, run two different offense. Teams do it. That's how, Like that's how it's supposed to. When you have a ball dominant star like that, or two ball dominant stars. I mean, I think back to the Thunder for years. Wasn't that the complaint that they would like Scott Brooks wouldn't stagger Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook properly? Yeah. Like, I don't know. I've always been kind of a believer in that as a way to win, especially. And again, we've talked about it a million times on the show. It's just how unique of guys those two guys are as stars. in that they want to create more for others, probably more than they want to shoot, and the fact they're just not shooters. They both live on getting tough shots. It makes sense to just split those guys up when you can, and trust, put shooters around them, right? We've said it a couple times that Jimmy, surrounded by shooters, one of the best weapons in the sport. And then crunch time, obviously, those two guys, like, I know the defense was pretty rocky last night, but down the stretch, they like really locked in. And I think the Jazz only scored like 2 points in the last 3 or 4 minutes there. So, they've obviously, they have to coexist. But I think they also have to work independently. That's the only way that this team can, especially to close out the playoffs are different where guys play more minutes, but to close out the regular season, that's the only way they can keep pace like this. Although eventually they're just gonna have to move into playoff mode, because again, a lot of their goals are kind of out the window.
Yeah. And look at the standings now. I'm just trying to think of like what it's gonna take for them to avoid the play-in, as unlikely as it is.
Yeah.
They have 12 games left. I'm thinking 10-2. Because I Brooklyn goes 500 and New York goes 500. I think they both finished like with 46 wins, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 46 wins. You'd have 37 wins right now. So they can go 10-2 and finish with 47 wins. They can.
Now, have they won 10? Have they won 10 of 12 at any point this season? Probably not, right?
I don't think so. I mean, their best stretch was when, like in maybe January, right, where they went. I'm trying to think. I mean, they had a 4-game winning streak. Their longest winning streak is 4, which came when?
So they can't have had a. I guess they could.
It came in December. Yeah, I mean, it's unlikely. Their best stretch was probably this one where they were
4, 6,
8 and 3.
8 and 3. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's possible, but
it would have to be their best stretch of the season.
It would have to be the best stretch of the season, and that's probably it's not impossible. They go 10-2. I think they have at least a chance to finish 6. And
they do have 2 games against the Knicks left, and 1 against Brooklyn.
And 1 against
obviously, they don't have the tiebreaker against Brooklyn, but they do still
2
have
games
a game
against Detroit.
Them.
2 games against Detroit.
The schedule's favorable.
It's one of the easiest schedules.
Grizzlies right now are falling apart, right? Like
the Wizards, Orlando to close it out. Like, winnable games.
They've really only got like 1 game left that you're like, it's that Sixers game on TNT on April 6th, which on paper that's like the only one like right in a loss. But again, who knows? And if the Heat are fighting for something, Jimmy against like the Sixers on TNT, like that's, as we've said, they've been really good in their biggest games of the year, and that certainly would count as one.
Yeah, and look, I know 6 has been the goal, right? And just getting on a plane is the goal, but they're the same distance back from 5. So
right.
I mean, it's not out of the. Yeah. Again, it's unlikely.
I mean, you've
been very negative on this
teams,
episode.
Obviously, you have to pass 2 teams, but
But if they get to 5 and face Cleveland in the first round, that's not totally out of out of the realm of possibility. So I don't think it's going to happen. Our prediction is they finish 6. But if you're looking for optimism, if you're looking for a goal for the Heat to reach in these final few weeks, I think 10-2 is the goal right now, because that would seem to at least get you to 6 and avoid the play-in.
What would 10-2 look like? What do they have to do to hit that? And
they have to get.
And have you seen anything to make you think it's possible in the last couple games?
I think it's what we talked. Jimmy and 3-point shooting. That's about it. But I think the key for them is their defense. Their defense has to get right, because I don't trust the offense to be as consistent. Like
they're not scoring 120 every night,
right? To win, to just win behind their offense 10 out of 12 games, like that's not going to happen. Their defense has to be elite for them to pull that off. And unfortunately, we haven't seen that really at all since maybe one or 2 games that their defense played well. But other than that, it's been really shaky and inconsistent, which is weird again, because they were so good on defense the first few months, and it's changed here the last few weeks. But if I had to pick one thing that would take, they need to do during that stretch to finish 10-2, it'd be get back to playing elite defense.
Before we wrap up, NCAA tournament this weekend, always the time I think casual college basketball fans can lock in and start thinking about the draft a little bit. Anyone on your radar? Like, you just raise your hand for people listening that you are a college basketball
casual college basketball
fan. the Heat, they have a first round pick. It could be not high. I mean, I guess it could be if they miss the play and then jump up in the lottery, but
like 17 or something like
yeah,
that.
it could
Or
be like
18.
17, 18, 16. Like it could be pretty high up there. Um, any names you've heard this year that are interesting to you that you want to watch this weekend?
Well, Wembanyama is really good. I'm kidding.
Yeah. It's a
I
weird
mean,
draft because literally 4 of the top 5
yeah.
projected top 5 picks are not in the tournament between Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson,
Stu, yeah.
and the Thompson twins from Fort Lauderdale who play for Overtime Elite. And then the other guy is Brandon Miller, who's got his own issues.
Right.
But the Heat are probably not going to get any of those guys unless something goes terribly wrong and then terribly right.
I was saying, and terribly right. Yeah, right.
But for the most part, they're probably in the mid, the mid-teens, I would say, is where they're going to wind up. I don't know. Have you looked at any mock drafts or anything, or any names that pop out to you?
I mean, the one you were saying before we started recording is interesting, Jett Howard.
Yeah, unfortunately not in the tournament.
Oh, he's not? Oh, wow.
They're actually playing in the NIT tonight, if you want to check that out.
Well, I'll tell you that's what you meant, the NIT. There you go. I'm going to watch the NIT tonight. But no, I mean, he would be interesting. He's Juwan Howard's son. He's a wing with length and height, 6'8". Looking at right now at the big board of NBADraft.net, and he's 16th. So he'd be right in that range. And the Heat like local, the connections of maybe getting guys that
actually 2 guys right in that range. Taylor Hendricks from Fort Lauderdale also is kind of right in that range. Another guy though not in the tournament, playing Florida in the NIT in the first round. So
there's no reason to watch the tournament.
No, just check out the
NIT. NIT. That's where the Heat's future draft picks are playing. But yeah, that's one that immediately sticks out just because of the last name and because he's kind of a position of need, right? More wings with length, and he's projected to go right in that range where they probably will be picking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a couple other guys. Chris Murray from Iowa. There's a couple older guys who are interesting. Chris Murray from Iowa, who is why am I forgetting Murray's name for the Kings?
Keegan.
Yeah. I'm going to start that over.
All right, go ahead.
A couple other names, a couple older guys stick out. Chris Murray from Iowa, who's Keegan Murray's brother, kind of projected to go in that same range. Similar player to his, big forward with some scoring ability, All-American this year. Iowa guys are always very skilled offensively. Trace Jackson Davis, who Miami could play in round 2 for Indiana. Big, athletic, big man. Older guy, though, 23 already. But he's late first round range there. And then a couple other guys.
Do you like this draft class?
I mean, so it's weird because the top, I haven't seen a lot of those guys.
Yeah.
Other than like watching, obviously, Scoot and Wembanyama and the like when they did their showcase at the start of the year. Brandon Miller is, I think, awesome. And then the Thompson twins, I've watched them a lot in high school. I've always been a fan of theirs. So it's interesting. I like Grady Dick from Kansas. Definitely kind of falls in that, like, the Tyler Hero, Christian Brown mold, right? The fun, sneaky, athletic white guy who can shoot it. Probably not going to fall to the Heat, though. Another interesting guy, and I'm not a Duke guy, but Kyle Filipowski, big shooter, 19 years old, freshman. We'll see if, Duke is, I think, a very favorable draw in this tournament. I would not be surprised if he is a guy that, he just seems like a guy the Heat would like, especially if they want to try to fix their three-point shooting. Bryce Sensabaugh, another one of those freshmen, like kind of a big scorer forward for Ohio State, one of the most impressive freshmen in the country. So it's not like my favorite draft, especially because I am biased towards college guys who go high, and there's just not a lot of those in this draft. But I like some of the guys a little later on, and I really like Brandon Miller. Some of the other guys I mentioned, and Zach Edey, who's kind of the best guy in the country and projected as a second round pick, is just like fascinating to me. 7'4", like I never thought we'd see another Yao Ming, but we're kind of seeing another Yao Ming because he can shoot a little bit too.
I'm learning right now with you all these guys because
Yeah, there
I've
you
been covering the NBA. Like you
Yeah,
think we
it's
watch
hard to
this
keep.
college
Yeah,
basketball, it's just they overlap. You're just so busy watching following the NBA and following the team you cover. It's just so tough. So I really start my draft prep just like right after the season, and then
yeah,
then I look like an expert like a month later, even though I haven't
exactly.
watched college basketball season. So that's how it works.
Oh, and
A peek behind the curtain.
another guy I like Isaiah Wong.
Yeah, I mean, he just seems to have an NBA skill set just because of his ability
Another
to
guy who's
score in
older,
isolation,
which will keep him as a second round pick. But yeah, I mean, he's super athletic.
He'd be like a really good scorer off the bench. I think he can make a career for himself.
I mean, he feels like, again, I think he'll get drafted, but he does feel a lot like some of the like guys the Heat find
right.
like he's got a little, he's more athletic, I think, than like a Kendrick Nunn or Gabe Vincent, but like similar, just like a guy who's like a really good scorer at the college level. Was probably too old to get drafted. But like he definitely like kind of feels in that mold to me.
Yeah. And he developed like his point guard skills and become a little bit of a more well-rounded offensive player. Could play a combo, play as a combo guard. Yeah, like I could see that. I definitely could see that. Do you think he's the best NBA prospect kind of on the Kings this year? They have a few, right?
I mean, Omir's really good. We'll see what happens if he's going to play Norshad, but he's small. Like he's a small, big man. But he's like super high energy guy, right? I mean, so the thing is, like, their two best players are, well, those two, and then Jordan Miller, who's like 25 years old.
True.
Who's like been around forever. And I actually like him a lot. Like if he was a sophomore, I think he would be pretty interesting, good size, kind of like a does everything, like super role player. But he's just, I mean, he'll get a shot, obviously, with someone, I think, in summer league or whatever, but he's just, I think too old to get drafted. And then Nigel Pack is the other one who's just like has been, I think, a little, obviously this is Wong's team, he's ACC player of the year. So Pack, who's the point guard and was supposed to be this great 3-point shooter and had his kind of ups and downs as a shooter, has kind of been overshadowed a little bit. But yeah, I don't know about him as an NBA prospect, but he's a good player too.
Yeah. Well, this could all be moot if the Heat go to the finals and they have the 30th pick in the draft, but we'll see. Yeah.
All right. I think we can finish things up there. You can follow Anthony on Twitter at Anthony_Chiang. Follow me on Twitter at DBWilson2. Yeah, we've got your Heat coverage at MiamiHerald.com, so go check it out. And thanks, as always, for listening, and we will talk to you guys next week.